The American dream once stood for hope, a small home, a steady job, family dinners, and the promise that hard work would lead to success. But today, that dream is slipping away. While leaders argue over foreign wars, the real crisis at home, a crumbling economy, is getting worse and being completely ignored. Inflation is crushing everyday Americans. Young and old alike are feeling the pain. Trust in the system is fading fast, and a recession now feels closer than ever. When it hits, it won't be the billionaires or giant corporations who suffer. It'll be regular people living in already fragile states. Millions are already struggling. Nearly 3 million Americans are facing homelessness, and about 42 million live below the poverty line. Wages can't keep up with soaring housing costs. Infrastructure is crumbling, and the social safety net is paper thin. If the economy collapses, some states won't just struggle. They could fall apart completely. In today's video, we'll reveal the 10 states most at risk of collapse if a recession hits. Stay tuned. Your state might be on the list without you even realizing it. Number 10, New York. Once upon a time, many of us dreamed about New York, the city that never sleeps, where hard work could transform your life. But today, things aren't quite the same. Have you ever imagined that a wealthy state like New York could be the first to crumble if America falls into a recession? Right now, New York is buried under more than $400 billion in debt. Tens of thousands of small businesses have shut down, taking jobs and dreams with them. Meanwhile, the cost of living keeps skyrocketing. Researchers say a single adult now needs to earn over $138,000 a year just to survive. A family of four? Over $318,000 just to get by. It's heartbreaking. Even if you're managing today, tomorrow might be a different story. Prices are rising so fast that stability feels like a distant memory. Seniors on fixed incomes now face impossible choices: pay for medication or keep the lights on. In New York alone, nearly 503,200 people, many of them seniors, are at risk of losing their homes. These are our parents, our grandparents, our neighbors. They deserve better. We can't afford to look away any longer. Once lively neighborhoods are turning into ghost towns. It's tragic that those who spent their lives building America now find themselves fighting just to stay afloat. Among more than 6,000 New Yorkers surveyed, only half said they plan to stay. But even that's uncertain. Retail stores are struggling with rampant theft and shrinking profits. Lifelong residents admit it's getting scary, not just because of prices, but also because of rising crime. New York was once the shining symbol of the American dream. But if even New York is on the edge. Number 9, California. Remember when California was a dream? Back in the 70s and 80s, it was the ultimate destination. Endless sunshine, booming industries, the magic of Hollywood, and wide-open opportunities. For generations, moving to California meant you'd made it. You were living the American dream. But today, that dream is slipping away. It's hard to imagine that the state with the largest economy in the U.S., bigger than many countries, is now weighed down by skyrocketing housing costs, overwhelming taxes, and a growing wave of people packing up and leaving. Every day, more Californians find themselves without a home. Sidewalks in cities like Los Angeles are lined with tents. Cars have become bedrooms for people who once had steady jobs. Rent prices are simply out of reach. A small house might cost $5,000 to $7,000 a month. Even a modest one-bedroom apartment, at least $2,300. It's not just the poor who are struggling. Even middle-class families with decent incomes are feeling squeezed. Confusing policies, strict regulations, and the crushing cost of living have pushed many to their limits. In the past 5 to 6 years, over 1 million people have left California. Elderly folks, low-income workers, single parents. How are they supposed to survive when basic living costs more than they can earn? Mobile homes now line the highways. Middle-class neighborhoods have for sale signs everywhere. And the question so many ask themselves at night: I worked hard my whole life. Why can't I afford to live here anymore? If a recession hits, and signs are pointing that way, California could be one of the hardest hit states. Over 40% of its tax revenue comes from tech and real estate. If those bubbles burst, services like healthcare, welfare, and elderly support could be slashed. Stay tuned. The list ahead only gets more shocking. 8. Illinois, a dream in crisis. Illinois was once the beating heart of American industry. Railroads, factories, docks, and schools built by millions of hard-working hands. But today, that proud state is on the edge of financial collapse. Public debt is soaring. Schools are crumbling. The pension system, once a promise of security, is now a broken dream. Over $140 billion in pension debt hangs over Illinois, and when the economy falters, it won't just be unpaid, it will be devastating. And who will suffer? Not the wealthy, not the politicians. It's the everyday people, the ones who spend a lifetime working, paying taxes, trusting the system. Imagine giving 40 years of your life to your community, only to retire and find there's no money left. Your pension is gone. Your welfare is slashed. Your American dream shattered. Recession would be a death blow. Illinois has already drained its reserves. The state is delaying debt payments, cutting budgets for schools, hospitals, and nursing homes. Prices are skyrocketing. Services are vanishing. Imagine retiring and having to choose between buying medicine or paying for heat. Imagine families packed into tiny apartments because no one can afford rent anymore. This isn't a warning. It's real. It's happening. If you've worked hard, if you once believed in America and now feel betrayed, you're not alone. Number 7, Kentucky. What happens when you do everything right? Work hard, obey the law, raise your family, and still can't make ends meet? Welcome to Kentucky, once the beating heart of America's working class. Kentucky stood as a proud symbol of resilience. But today, nearly a quarter of its people live in poverty, and that number keeps climbing. As the cost of food, utilities, and fuel soars, the small towns that once thrived on factory jobs are struggling. The factories are gone, and with them, stability. When the next recession hits, Kentucky will be among the first to feel it, and the slowest to recover. The state leans heavily on federal aid, but when budgets are slashed, it's the most vulnerable, the elderly, disabled, and children, who pay the price. Do you remember when a factory job could support a whole family? When retirement meant security, not fear. In Kentucky, those promises are breaking. Proud workers now line up at food banks. Some seniors are forced to sell their wedding rings just to afford medicine. Did you grow up in a small Kentucky town? Share your story. Number 6, Mississippi. Imagine being born in a place that looks peaceful, endless cotton fields, crickets singing at night, neighbors waving every morning. It feels like home. But behind that beauty, there's a harder truth. Mississippi is the poorest state in America, and it's fighting to survive in a system that has forgotten it. You can work 2, even 3 jobs. You can be a veteran, a father, a mother. But here, sometimes effort just isn't enough. Household incomes are half the national average. Nearly 1 in 5 people live below the poverty line. Hospitals are closing. 5 have shut down in just a few years. And when a recession hits, Mississippi always feels it first and hardest. When budgets get tight, states like Mississippi, ones that depend on federal help, get left behind. Schools lose funding. Health clinics close. Pensions get delayed. And worst of all, few people speak up. There was a time when small-town pride and community held everything together. Today, poverty, addiction, and despair have torn many families apart. Veterans sleep in trucks. Single moms work 2 jobs but still have to choose between food and medicine for their kids. And if a recession comes, it won't just hurt Wall Street. It will crush the hope of hundreds of thousands who are already hanging by a thread. Number 5, Louisiana. Imagine a mild recession, not a Great Depression, just a mild one, being enough to sink an entire state, not underwater, but into poverty, unemployment, and despair for decades. That's the reality Louisiana faces. Today, nearly 1 in 5 people in Louisiana live below the poverty line. Schools are crumbling, hospitals are closing, and hope feels like it's slipping away. The state leans heavily on energy, tourism, and seaports, industries that get hit hard when the economy slows. When America hurts, Louisiana bleeds. Federal aid has been a lifeline, but what happens if that aid dries up? Families will be left to fend for themselves, caught in a storm they can't outrun. You might remember lazy afternoons on a Baton Rouge porch, jazz floating through the air, or the electric buzz of Mardi Gras. But those memories are fading. Now there are growing lines at food banks, boarded-up clinics, and young people packing up and leaving home. A deep recession could wipe that away, leaving behind a broken place where a single mother drives hours for basic medicine and a veteran sleeps on a park bench in New Orleans. For Alaska, what happens when the last great symbol of freedom becomes the first to fall? Alaska, once a land of resilience and independence, stands on shaky ground. Life here isn't just cold because of the climate. It's growing cold in the hearts of its people. Almost everything in Alaska depends on two things: oil and federal money. A staggering 85% of the state's budget comes from oil and gas. And every Alaskan counts on payouts from the Permanent Fund, which also relies on oil profits. If the U.S. economy takes a hit, oil prices will crash, and Alaska will bleed. Federal support would shrink. Thousands would lose their only source of income. Small towns are already emptying out. Elderly residents can't afford to heat their homes. Indigenous communities, once self-sufficient, now face hunger, unemployment, and crumbling health care. Sound distant? It's not. This could just as easily happen to your community. Number 3. Nevada. What happens if Las Vegas, the symbol of entertainment and freedom, becomes the first city that can no longer survive when the U.S. economy takes a hit? Behind the dazzling lights are fragile communities, where people live day to day on tips, overtime, and the hope that tomorrow will be a little better. Nevada's economy leans heavily on tourism and entertainment, making up more than 25% of its total output. About 70% of jobs are in services, from waiters and housekeepers to casino workers. But when Americans start cutting back, who's still spending on hotels, shows, or slot machines? A nationwide recession could trigger a devastating collapse here. Think of the Las Vegas Strip's neon glow. Now picture a single mother working 2 hotel jobs, coming home at midnight, barely able to pay rent. Picture long lines of cars at food banks, where once stable families now struggle just to buy milk. This isn't a distant fear. It's already happening. The hard-working people who kept the dream alive are the first ones left behind. And with little relief or policy support, the future looks even harsher. If the lights of Vegas go out, it's not just Nevada's problem. It's a warning for all of America. 2. West Virginia. Imagine waking up one day and finding your entire state cut off from the modern economy. For West Virginia, that's not just a nightmare. It's a looming reality. Once the heart of America's coal industry, the state now faces steep decline. With one of the highest poverty rates in the nation, an overwhelmed healthcare system, and a shortage of sustainable jobs, West Virginia stands on shaky ground. If the U.S. economy contracts and federal budgets shrink, who will be there to help? Many seniors who spent their lives building this country could be left surviving on food stamps, old wood stoves, and dwindling Social Security checks. Maybe you grew up believing America was a land of endless opportunity. But what happens when the factories close, the stores shut down, and the next generation is forced to leave just to survive? What future remains for West Virginia? Number 1. New Mexico. What happens if a recession cuts off the flow of money from Washington, D.C., and states like New Mexico are left to fend for themselves? New Mexico is heavily reliant on federal funding. More than 35% of its budget comes from it. If that lifeline dries up, schools could lose funding, hospitals could delay salaries, and vital programs for indigenous and low-income communities could vanish. Poverty, already a serious issue, would only deepen. Communities without stable electricity or clean water will be pushed even further into crisis. A nationwide recession wouldn't just hit Wall Street. It would hit everyday people, workers losing jobs, families skipping medicine, and people lining up for food aid. Inequality has been growing for decades. A recession could be the spark that lights a fire. Are you feeling the pressure where you live? Share your story. You're not alone, and your voice matters.